morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul?
and Jolene. And today we're talking about real world events in RPGs.
Right. Real world events and RPGs. So a lot of people will get their ideas for their games from real life events. And that's usually where I think most people get their ideas from things that happen in the world, in the news, or stories from the past of things that were real, or maybe put a little different spin on it. Obviously, like if you play a Weird War II game, it's not quite going to be quite historical, right?
But also, it'll probably be a little bit less controversial when you add in werewolves and things like that.
Right. So I think lately, the more the more conscious we are of our games and how they role playing games can have a real emotional impact on the players. It's a little different than watching a movie or watching a TV show, and even those shows can elicit an emotional response, right? Some shows can be really emotional and get you all teary eyed and stuff like that. The death scene of Boromir always gets me a little bit. I get a little dust in my eye.
It always makes me cry.
A little dust in my eye, So obviously, that kind of media will give you an emotional response.
Well, I just finished watching Picard, the first season, and
the
last episode, I told Saul it broke my heart and put it all back together again. It was really hard to watch.
Some game masters, GMs out there are conscious of the fact that you don't want to hurt other people's feelings or make them upset or bring unwanted reactions at the table. Real life events can do that, right? I think if you set your game in World War II, World War One, even now Vietnam, and I've done both.
You should be careful with Vietnam though, because some of you don't know who
is a vet.
Yeah.
A lot of my games, I just use it as a backdrop, right? I don't use an actual event that happened in Vietnam, right? And I wouldn't
use a jungle scene fighting and anything like that.
But even closer events like 9/11, me and Jolene have talked about this, and
I say it's taboo.
9/11 or like let's say Katrina, natural disaster, and the only reason I would think is that you wouldn't want to use those events is one. People are obviously still alive that went through that, and you might actually be at a gaming table where they know somebody who died in that event, right? And then that makes the point of playing a role playing game for me, which is to have fun. It makes it not fun, right?
It kind of sucks all the fun out of the table.
Yes, and you don't want that to happen. I don't think so. I think it's pretty important that we are conscious of the fact of the things of the settings and stuff that we put in our game. And, and this comes from, I've been reading, I'm on Facebook and all kinds of other social media, and this propped up and, and there's always a interesting reaction to it. Some people say, well, it's not that important. It's not a big deal, but I think it might be a big deal. Well, there's two reasons, right? There's two halves to this story is if you mainly play with the same people over and over again, right? That you've been playing since, like if I've been playing with the same, actually it's happening online. I'm playing with these people that I played with since junior high, some of them, and then definitely a little later in high school. And I've known them over 30 years, right? So I sort of know their history. I sort of know their past. Now I don't know everything that's happened in their lives, of course.
And then anytime they tell him anything, you sound surprised.
That happens at work all the time. People go, "Why do you always sound surprised when I tell you something?" It's funny. So that is a personality trait of mine. but you may not know everything that's happened in their lives. I remember, you just don't know. You don't know if that you just
and those are people you've been playing with your whole life.
Yeah, your whole life. So I understand when people say, well, I don't think I need to worry about that stuff because I know my friends
which is probably true.
Which is probably true for your group.
You know what people can handle, what people can't, or you learn as you go what to do and not to do, and what subjects to touch and not to touch.
But most likely, I think what happens is that for those few people that only play with their friends that they've always played with, there's also other players that play with people in different groups, and they rotate and they find a group and they play with them for 6 months, and after that campaign or whatever game is over, they'll they'll play with another group of people, and maybe it might be a mix of same players or different players, but you're always finding new games and different players and different games.
And if you go to conventions, you're running games for people that
Oh,
you have
definitely.
no idea who they are most
Right.
of the time.
I mean, I'm usually, now that I've been going to conventions for a long time, I'll get, most of the time, like half the people who play my game are people I've known for a long time. But there's sometimes, like, what was it, a couple years ago at the Dungeon Con, I ran a Tales of the Loop game, and I didn't know a single person, and I don't even remember ever, like some people you recognize, and oh yeah, you see them, in the hallway, and you recognize them, and they've been going to conventions for a long time. You may not even know their name, but most of these guys or and ladies,
He had never even run into.
right, I didn't recognize at all. So now I do. I see them in the hallway. I go, hey, and I wave at them, and they go, they wave back to me. So that's pretty cool. So in con games, you're always going to run into new players, and you never know what their game is, or what their history is.
So my suggestion is, if you're going to use any kind of real life event, that you change it so much that nobody's going to know what the event is, and you also talk about it before you start playing the game to make sure that this game is about such and such.
Right.
And I would not mention the real life event that you based it on or anything like that. I would
Right.
just say, if you're uncomfortable in any way, please don't play.
So in con games, you're right. I think we've talked about playing with different people, new people, strangers, and as innocuous as some things that you put in your game, it might trigger something, that a memory of somebody, or a feeling that an event that they had in their past. And like I said, we're here to. I play role playing games to have fun, and a lot of people are like me. I think, for me and for a lot of people, escapism is a big word, is a big reason why we play games. We want to escape. I don't want to say the drudgery of real life, but I don't. I'm a grocery store clerk, right? I don't want to play a game where I play grocery clerk, okay? Unless it's like Saul, the magnificent grocery clerk, and he's actually a superhero. That's his alter ego. But unless it's a game like that, I don't want to be playing 3 a.m. to noon. Person going to work, punching the time card, and doing mundane things. I mean, that does not sound fun.
No, he wants to play a gnome called Chatterwick, who doesn't like plans.
Doesn't like plans, right? So I think most people play role playing games for escapism, or to tell a story, to tell a shared story, and that's pretty cool. So when you look at it that way, you don't want to hurt people's feelings, and you don't want to upset people. So when you use a real life event, just like Jolene said, it's probably best to base your idea or your game or your adventure on an event that happened, but change it up so it's indistinguishable from the original. You don't even recognize it. Not indistinguishable, but unrecognizable from that event. I think somebody we're watching some video, and he talked about using the Ebola crisis in Africa as a disease for a game, but he didn't call it Ebola, and they didn't have the same characteristics, but it was based on that. And even now, we are now in the age of COVID-19, and would you want to use a pandemic in your game right now?
No.
As a backdrop. Now, I think some people might, but let's say you have somebody in your game and they just lost their grandfather, their grandmother, or their parent to this disease, to this virus. Probably don't want to run that game with them, if that's even. I mean, you should probably know those people, better than, you would know that if their grandparent or somebody then you passed away. But if you didn't, and you did run this game, then, I think it would be not a very good experience for anyone at that point. If they find out, you know what, this is really bothering me because, I just lost a parent to this disease. I don't think it's funny. I don't think it's something that we should use for entertainment. So I think that if you're conscious of that and you realize that that kind of stuff can happen, I think you would decide not to run with real life events.
You probably don't want to do real time events either when everybody's in,
right.
What do you want to call it? Shelter in place.
We're sheltered in place.
I call it lockdown because it feels like prison sometimes.
No, it's definitely not lockdown.
I know.
But yeah, so other things that, even professional writers, right? Even professional writers of books and supplements, there's a couple years ago, there was a I'm gonna butcher it because I don't really know too much about vampire, but there was a Caramella. It's a source book for a certain kind of vampire clan. I know that much, and it talked about in the game there was a point plot point campaign about or a series of adventures that dealt with the persecution of in Chechnya of LGBT people, right? And in that, instead of the real evil that is being persecuted against real people, they said it was a vampire plot, and they were using the media to disguise their plot and stuff like that. And so it really drew a lot of criticism, and there was a lot of people who there was a few people who complained, well, that people are being overly sensitive. But I think those people were luckily were in the minority. I mean, the way it worked was that the people working on a book were like a studio, and what happened was the people who owned that studio, once it became known that what they were doing, they came in and they stopped production on that book. They took out everything, all these references to that situation. I think quite a few people got fired, and they basically took over the writing and the editing of that book, or at least the editing. And they apologized because they said that part of their job was to make sure that any product that comes out under their brand should have been more. They should have been more cognizant and more active in the editing process, and they weren't. And so they apologized for that, and they took it over. And I think they did
the right thing.
They did the right thing in that sense. And sure, there was some people who were upset. Well, that's just gonna, delay my game or delay my source book that I bought, and or this and that. And I don't know.
Deal with it, people.
I don't know what to say about those.
That's
people.
ridiculous that they would even put that in there. The idea that's a real life event that
right
should not be used in any way other than to say that it's wrong.
Right. And so that's really, that's really telling of how people can be, so caught up in their own idea of their game and not take in consideration the consequences of what you're writing. And always, Jolene, my wife, we have a 16-year-old son, and sometimes he says things we're like, no. And she always says, before it comes out of your mouth, say it in your head first, and then decide if that's a good thing to say, and sure, teenagers, young people may not have that filter, may not have that maybe this.
What are you talking about? Adults don't have that filter.
But it's more prevalent. I would think it's more prevalent in teenagers, people with less life experience and less, teenagers, they're so self-centered, they don't really care too much about, they don't take into consideration consequences of their actions because they don't worry about dying. They don't worry about getting hurt. That's why people who are young get a lot of tickets, speeding tickets, reckless driving tickets. I'm not saying older people like me don't get them. I've never gotten a speeding ticket, by the way, but it's less prevalent, and that's why people, that's why the numbers don't lie, right? That's why insurance rates are so expensive for teenagers. If you have a teenager and they start driving, and you see that insurance bill just jump up like massively, then you know why. It was because statistically, they do a lot more ridiculous things in their car.
This is true. I think everyone should use that filter, though. If you're going to say something, especially in a group of people you don't know, even in a group of people you do know, say it in your head first to see how it actually sounds before you say it out loud. I do that myself. It's something that I do a lot because I am very sarcastic and
No, you?
Yeah. So I try to not offend people as much as possible. Sometimes it's hard because people will say stuff and I think something in my head and I know I better not say it out loud because it's just my reaction, right, to things. I do know people who just say it whatever they think
off the top of their head.
Yes. So that particular example, I would just like to say that you should definitely be cognizant of who you're playing with, and you should also be cognizant of what is right and what is wrong. And dealing with the LGBT communities and ideas about them in using a real life event like that is totally wrong. You should know that already. And if you do use something like that, then somebody needs to tell you that you're wrong, and you need to think about it.
Well, I think that's what happened in that particular instance is that, there's a whole team working on that book or that source book. And, and they just weren't,
Well, somebody might not have actually known what they were writing about, but still, if you're an editor, you should be able to to figure that out, right? Because
Yeah.
you should know the sources that your people are using,
Right.
or you should be able to look it up. Most editors do stuff like that. So
Yeah. One of the things that I was comparing this to is the idea of that term too soon, right? A lot of people make that joke. You know, like they'll make a joke about a dead celebrity that just died, and somebody go, "Oh," and then the person who said the bad joke would
was
say,
that too soon?
"Was that too soon? Was it too soon now?" And you know, some people wait an appropriate amount of time, but some people don't, and so you don't want to be that person that doesn't wait an appropriate amount of time. And some things may not ever be appropriate. You know, setting the game in 9/11, setting the game in during Katrina. You know, if I was running a game in New Orleans, I probably would not ever set anything during Katrina unless it was like a heroic thing that people were doing, and shows how, you know,
And then you
whatever.
would change the place. You wouldn't run anything with a hurricane in New
New
Orleans.
Well, I mean, I was just saying, if you did and you treated it with respect and it was sensitivity in the sense that, you know, you're showing strength versus adversity.
Yes.
Adversity. There you go. Or in that sense, right? That's why we get certain movies about certain events and they touch us and they show us the good things about it, right? And it's okay. But if you make a movie that belittles those events or that makes fun of those events, you know, that is not cool and probably will never be made unless it's made in somebody's backyard or something. So that's what I'm saying is that I think that's what we are trying to say is that we're trying to treat every event, especially a real life event, with respect. Of course, the alternative to that is to change it up, use it as a backdrop for your own game, but change everything, you know, so it's unrecognizable, and then, you know, you can do anything you want. A lot of times I'll use like things that happen in ancient times or something like that, and just apply them in real life, or not real life, but like in a modern game, you know, like something that happened, like a mystery or something like that. But even then, it could get or something, or I come up with something out of the top of my head. You know, I talked about the Tales of the Loop game. I set it in Monterey because that's where I'm from, Monterey County, and I never thought about it. And I put, you know, events happen, you know, and there was once I've talked about it before. I put a scene where teenagers had drowned on this specific beach, and one of my players who, like I said, I didn't know. He said, you know, I said this, you know, as the scene was ending, he goes, "Yeah." I go, "You okay?" He goes, and he said, "Yeah, I knew when I was a kid, two of my friends died by drowning on that beach." Now, there's absolutely no way I could have known that, right? There's no way. And to me, it was just a simple, not a simple, but it was part of the plot, right? It was part of the investigation and stuff like that. And that to me convinced me to start using the X card because I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't have continued. I didn't continue that scene. And he came up, he told me that after the scene was over. So there was literally nothing I could do. But if I had an X card, he might have touched it, or he might not have. He said he was okay, and we went on playing. So, you know, even not a simple, but even a unconscious decision to put an event happen at a real life location could have consequences. And though he said he was okay, you know, to me, I think if I had two friends of mine who died when I was a kid, that would definitely be traumatic, right? Especially if I was there. And here it is, and you know, I'm using this in the game where we're supposed to have fun, and you know, I you know, I touched on a memory of his that wasn't fun, it wasn't, you know, entertaining, and I felt bad, and there's no way around it. Now I don't think I could have done anything about it, but if the scenes had started and he would have touched the X card, if I had it there, then we would have avoided that scene and then just kept going. Like, you know what happens. Boom, let's keep going. And I'm a better GM for that, right? Because now I'm cognizant of even things that I may think are totally like not even that bad of a deal or that emotional, and now I know that they could be simply because I put it in a real place in the world.
Well, I was just thinking that that's in the game that we just played the other night with Jim and our friends.
Oh yeah.
He had one of the things that he has on there is clown masks. And so I had no problem killing the things because I hate clowns. I don't like clowns in any form, size, shape, anything. And Saul knows this, but Jim obviously didn't. But it was hilarious to me because when I saw the
I
clown
was
faces,
it was
I was like,
terrible.
okay. I'm all, oh my god, I hate clowns. And then, but it wasn't traumatic for me in any way. It was just when it came time to kill them, I had no problem cutting off the clown's head.
Oh,
So
Jesus.
even though it wasn't really a clown, but you know what I mean.
That was really weird.
But Saul knows that they
Yes.
freak me out, and not only clowns but mimes also. And we've been at places where they're attracted to me and want to come up and talk to me, or mime at me, and I'm like,
Interact with you.
I'm all, just get the hell away from me.
That was really weird because I didn't know that. I didn't know that was gonna happen. And so he goes. So we go. What do these guys look like? So he has his picture and he posts his picture, and they're like grotesque clowns, right? Because they're just there's clowns, and they're kind of grotesque anyway. But these are like disgustingly grotesque clowns, and so they were very disturbing looking, even no matter what. Even if you don't like clowns, even if you like clowns,
A lot of people, but that's a thing now. Clowns are a thing, right? For
like
me,
dolls,
they're
like dolls.
yeah, clowns, dolls, things like that. I don't like.
Yeah,
It
was
wasn't
it?
traumatic
You're
for
right.
me because even though when I looked up, I saw the picture.
Yeah.
I had seen it before earlier in the game, so
Oh,
I knew that there were going to be clowns. The first, and it wasn't a bad thing, but everybody laughed, like Saul and Felipe and Augustine. They know that I can't stand clowns.
so it was perfectly fine to eliminate them. Like,
Yeah, I
out of
had
the
no
way.
problem. See, so things like that. There's things that, but if someone's really scared of clowns, like I usually don't freeze up when I see clowns, but I
No.
get a icky feeling like, oh, I don't like that.
Well, like it's like my, I'm gonna use my sister-in-law. She is deathly afraid of cats, right?
Because when she was little, where she lived, there were all kinds of cats, and they were like feral cats.
Oh,
And because she told us the story,
I must have
and
forgotten.
and they would like try to come into the house to get the food, and her grandmother or would like beat them and try to get them away. So she
Okay.
has this fear of cats.
Ah,
So
when
she
she was a
seriously,
child.
yeah. So
No,
she
so-
seriously has.
No, so she's seriously phobic. She when and my mom used to have cats, and my sister has cats, and so if she even sees a cat, it's like, oh, they're so disgusting, and it's like it's real, right? She's not
She's not
faking.
making it up.
She's not making it up, and it's like, and it's super not cool, to I wouldn't like come up, oh, look at the pretty cat, and shove it in her face. There's no possible way I would ever do that.
No.
And so why would I have a game with somebody have a phobia, of cats,
But
and
you never know what people's phobias
That's
are,
right.
right? So
because Jim didn't know,
no,
because he's
no.
he's a friend for a long time, but he hasn't,
He's never been around me when
and we don't, when would that come up?
Yeah.
I don't like clowns.
So I thought it was ironic because it wasn't hard for me to take the clown's head off with my katana, but but it was a game, right? So you don't know what things, how people are going to react to stuff.
Another thing that I would warn is if you play in an area like, let's say I live in San Jose, the San Francisco Bay Area, and I grew up in Monterey, which is a county just south of us. And so when I run my games, my modern games, and like Tales from the Loop, I put the loop in Monterey. A Dresden game, I call it Monterey Dresden, and I base it in Cannery Row. And of course, Dresden Files, sometimes it's a mystery. People die left here and there, and so I think if you're gonna, just like the Tales of the Loop game that I use that element of two teenagers drowning on a specific beach, always be aware that if you're setting the game in a local area that everybody that you play with comes from or may come from, be careful about certain things like that, and of course, I'm talking about.
And you can never know though, so you have to that's why they tell you to. Although I don't think you would have said anything about that because that was part of the story. It wasn't.
Right.
You wouldn't have said if anybody has any fears of drowning or any or.
I might have, you could do that,
Then that would kind of take
the mystery out of it. Yeah, I don't know.
It would be weird. So you don't know what.
Well, there's that questionnaire that Monty Cook Games put out. What's it called? Consent in Gaming, and on the back sheet, on the back page, it has things you don't want to experience, right? Violence against animals, violence against children, clowns, and then they have space that you can write in for your own problems
Well,
or
that
your
would be a
own
good idea
phobias
if
or
you
your
don't know
own
the people at the table to pass it
uncomfortable.
out and
Yeah.
say, and then when you
And
got
it
it
doesn't
back, you
matter.
can look at it.
You don't even put your name on it. You
Right.
just look through it and you go, okay, and if you have like drowning, you would write that down, or electrocution for whatever
Yeah.
reason. You don't know what people have gone through. I think is the point, and so I think that's pretty heavy duty though. I mean that's a form they fill out, and you have to look at it as GM, and then you gotta, you might have to change up your game, and some GMs are not very good at
Running on the fly.
yes, or changing things, all of a sudden, or you could just say, I don't, somebody mentioned that they don't want to deal with this kind of scene, so I'll just tell you what happened, a real quick thing what happened, instead of any details about stuff, instead of role playing that situation. I think anytime you run your game in a local situation, especially if it's like there's death or there's some sort of bad things going on, be aware that people live in that area and they may have a problem with a certain situation that you're putting out on the table. I never thought about using that consent form, but I just think that would definitely eliminate a lot of problems in con game, especially the cons that we go to. Well, the ones we were going to, it drew a lot of people from the local area. Of course, some of the bigger ones draw people from
All over.
farther away, right? Seattle, LA, all across the United States. But the smaller local conventions, you're dealing with local people, and they've come from all kinds of different places. You don't know where they're coming from. So just like that guy who, he lived in San Jose, but would often go to Monterey to the beach and have fun. I came across that situation where I put an event exactly where one of his bad memories came from. So and that was just pure luck.
Well, and he said he was okay with it.
Right.
He told you, but it obviously brought the memory back. But
right.
He was okay.
Yes.
So, but if you would have known, you would have, and you didn't talk about it after that at all.
No.
You just moved on to a different scene and made sure.
I didn't need it.
I think it was more traumatic. It might have been more traumatic for you than for him.
Well, yeah.
But it could have been very traumatic for him.
It could have been. It could have been. It could have been his brother.
Yeah,
it could have been a family member. Then it would have been a little bit worse, I think.
And it's different when it comes to like things like clowns and stuff, because those of us who don't like them can handle seeing them, right? But maybe somebody can't. I don't know.
Yeah, somebody might have the phobia, like my sister-in-law.
like cats. I thought it just added to the game because we were playing Shadowrun and it was a bunch of orc gangsters, so it wasn't a big stretch that to distinguish them and stuff. So I thought it was pretty funny. Because then it made it easy. I didn't need any motivation because it was a clown face. I didn't have a problem.
You could no problem.
So, but you don't know how people are going to react, right?
Right.
So I thought that was just an example for us. It was just hilarious. I
totally forgot about that. And we just did that. We just played that Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was great because Jim is very visual. He's an artist, right? So he distinguished in his, and it's hard. You're playing online, right? So you got to get visual pictures, or it's hard to get people into the thing, you want to get people into the setting with visuals, right?
It helps.
So he had one of the gang groups was in like sports.
Oh, yes.
Some kind of.
They were like in the sports outfits,
and then
fans.
these other ones, to distinguish them as a different gang, they were in clown masks, and they're like, it's Shadowrun, so they're masks that are in front of their faces, and they can
actually they were holograms. I think they were right.
Yeah, it was very interesting, and I thought it was a great idea because it's hard to distinguish them, but. Since I'm like, okay, I don't mind killing the clowns because they're clowns.
They deserve to die.
They deserve to die.
So for you, it was like it actually helped you
the motivation.
Not like them.
Yeah,
And that's what he was going for. He was going for these guys are scumbags, right?
Yeah.
And and they're doing something wrong anyway, right? In the game.
It's Shadowrun. Everybody's doing something wrong.
Yeah, look at us with goody two shoes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think what we could take away from this episode is be sensitive to ideas that you have and how they may impact other people.
Make sure that if you're going to do anything at a real life event, that you make sure that it is the right time to use it, or switch it up so much that people don't associate it with that event. Be very careful with stuff like that. And if you're going to do something set in World War II, World War I is probably better than anything more recent. Post-apocalyptic games, though, have a lot of like Afghanistan and stuff like that in it. So you should really be really careful with
That's
who
true.
you're playing with.
I did use that. Did use that as a backdrop for my game, and so I never even thought about war veterans from that from the Afghan war, or from Iraq war, which that took place. But I wasn't playing like nitty gritty type of stuff. So be respectful of the event, right? Especially if you're using a real world event.
Change the names, change the places.
I would do that.
Change the city. Don't do anything about COVID-19 right now because people might not like that.
Yes, exactly.
There you go.
It'll be good.
Good luck. If you're going to use a real life event, be careful.
Yes. Remember, wash your hands and don't touch your face. Right?
This is Gaming Perspectives
with Saul
and Jolene. Have a good day.
Have a good day.